Friends, my name is Jesse. Welcome to Male Nurse Mentor. It's a community here where I, as a man, became a nurse. And I'm just trying to share knowledge, give back some information that, if I was to start this journey over again, that's the information I would be looking for. So that's the same information I'm trying to provide on this channel. You'll find informational videos. Today it happens to be, as you saw by the title, a Storytime video about the very first day at my very first job as a registered nurse. So this story is actually pretty interesting. There's a point in it where I'm like, is this actually happening to me? But it actually did happen. It was actually at a county jail, and I'll dive into it here in a second. But I think background is important. So for me, friends, if you've seen some of my videos, you know I'm pretty honest. I never really wanted to work as a nurse in a hospital. So going out of school into the workforce, trying to see where it is am I going to lay my roots, right? I don't want to work in a hospital, so I decided to apply for psych facilities, correctional institutions, and places like that. I had an overall underlying desire to be in law enforcement back in high school. Well, I decided to pivot, not pursue that lifestyle, go into nursing instead, and then kind of going full circle, I found myself in corrections. Not the one wearing the badge is what I say, but around the people that do, which I think is even better. I think you get paid slightly more, you help people in a different way, and you still help people, but your lifestyle, I think, is better. It's kind of tough to do law enforcement, right? I'd say. But that's just some background, just so you kind of have it in the back of your mind, heading into this story, right? So when I was applying to my very first job as a nurse, and maybe I'll explain that process in a future video, but I landed my very first gig at a local county jail. I've never been inside a jail. I've never been inside anything correctional. I've never been in trouble with the law. I've never had any of those experiences. Never been arrested. I've only been pulled over a couple times. So going into this, first job, I was kind of nervous, right? I didn't know what to expect. When I went in for my interview at that county jail gig, it was the first time I've ever been in a county jail. Like when I went for my interview, I went to the county sheriff's office. I checked in there, and then they kind of took me into the back through this elevator. Everything's very locked down, and you have to have an escort and things like that. But my very first day, I remember getting to my place, and I didn't know what I would leave with, right? I didn't know what to expect. What I encountered that day was something that I think most people wouldn't have come back the next day. But I was a new grad. I wanted to get some money, and I wanted to be in corrections. And I honestly felt going into corrections like, hey, I can handle this. And based on that first day and my experience and what had happened and me making it through made me realize I would be a good correctional nurse, actually. So it actually validated me being in that career, in that profession, right? In that specialty, if that makes sense. So friends, when I arrived, they have an intake, right? Let me just kind of break it down here. They have an intake area in the facility, right? This is downstairs. They have a normal residential area, I would call it. That's where all the inmates that are processed are housed. This is the place where you would think would be the cells, right? Where inmates are actually in. It'd be the cells, right? 2 people per cell. Everything is escort. Inmates, patient inmates, they're shackled with the wrist and the ankle restraints everywhere they go, escorted by an officer. Just for kind of an example, there's an elevator that gets you from the bottom floor up to, I think, the 4th floor, because there's like a total of 4 or 5 floors. It's all locked down. There's no buttons in this elevator. There's a camera in the middle pointing down at the feet, and you just kind of put like 2, 3, 4, 5, wherever floor you're trying to get to. And then the person on the other end with the camera is like in key control, and they take you to that floor. So it's all super locked down. I thought it was pretty cool. It's like such a unique, interesting place to work. If you have any questions specifically about correctional nursing, you can always reach out to me. I will definitely give you all the scoop, because I went into this blind, friends. I had no idea. I was Googling correctional nursing, and there's nothing. There's stuff from like 2014, 2015. I'm just like, there's stuff from then. What happened between then and like 2019, which is the year I entered the workforce? There's nothing. So I put up a post on all nurses and trying to get information, and it was crickets. So I was like, all right, I don't know what to expect. But now that you know intake, the upstairs area, intake was my first assignment on my very first day. So as a nurse, oftentimes you're going to get paired up with someone to precept you, somebody you'll orient with, right? So someone was super nice and they took me under their wing, and they happened to work intake that day. So I was in the intake section with them. Just to break down intake a little bit, intake is where when someone gets arrested, they'll get handcuffed and transported by a police officer into booking. Booking/intake is the same thing. It's the area where guys get their mugshot taken, right? They get their name and all their stuff filled out, and they kind of get told their charges, right? They either get an ability to post bail or they don't, right? That's all something else I won't really get into. But in that process, they also have to come and get medical clearance. As a nurse in intake, we do the medical clearance. They kind of come through us, we do a questionnaire, we ask them a bunch of questions. For example, if someone comes in with, high blood pressure history, right, hypertension, and they're on medications, through our questionnaire, we'll find that out. And they're like, oh, I take lisinopril. Oh, okay. And then where'd you get this lisinopril from? What pharmacy? So then we verify it and do the little things like that, right? It's all for continuity of care, which is interesting, right? You wouldn't think of that. So that's your nursing job in intake, is to kind of continue a person who's arrested medical plan of care while they're in county jail, right? Upstairs, they have sick calls where they can see doctors and nurses for, any medical illnesses that they have. They also refer them out whenever they need to see a specialist, or they're referred for things like that, right? So now with a lot of this out the way, I worked intake with my preceptor, we'll call her, right? And she's like, yeah, you can follow me. Super nice person. I get there and I'm just like super overwhelmed because I have no idea what to expect. It's my first day in a jail ever. First time around people in handcuffs. First time around this correctional environment. And just to kind of paint a bigger picture, in intake, they have a bunch of cells. This is where you're going to see the detox cell, right? It's like a big old room with a glass window, so the officers can just kind of observe this person just banging on the glass and going psycho, and trying to detox, right, from whatever it is that they took, right? They're clearly got arrested for being way too intoxicated, so they put them in this detox. And I have individual stories about all this stuff. But apart from these detox cells, they have safety cells, which are like suicide watch cells. They're slightly padded. All of them have doors that are very heavy, right? With huge like Folger Atom keys, right? Apart from these two types of cells, they also have a bunch of just holding cells. They'll put like 10 guys in these. And everyone's just super crammed in, when it's a busy night, and they're just in these holding cells, either waiting to get fully processed to go upstairs, or waiting for their bail bond to kind of post, right? So that's just kind of painting this picture. There's a bunch of these cells. There's a bunch of people down there. A lot of loud noises, people banging, people yelling, and then, sometimes it's quiet. It kind of goes back and forth, right? People get upset. Hey, why am I here? Things like that. So for me, that's like, you would think that's already overwhelming enough. So that was my first taste of this environment. And I knew going into this, friends, I knew that I was going to be in for something different. I knew that this was a correctional setting. Like, what else did I imagine it would be like? Well, I pictured it to be exactly like that. Like loud and people that are, kind of sketchy looking there, people in handcuffs, seeing police officers, seeing people yell, seeing people get yelled at, hey, be quiet. Like, these are all the things that I kind of imagined, right? So I was like, oh, cool. Like, this isn't like too out of the ordinary. Like, I can handle this. Like, this is cool. And then as I kind of go through the shift, right, there's another thing that happens. It's called medical codes. So there's medical codes called in the facility. These are kind of emergency medical calls that, an inmate upstairs is having chest pain, they're having stomach issues. These are called medical codes. And they have them. Here in the county jail, they call them man downs, right? Oh, man down. Oh, man down on level 2 or something like that. So as I'm with my preceptor, we hear a couple of these calls. And right off the bat, there's like 2 of them. The first one was like someone who was like, oh, it's a seizure. And then we get there and like the preceptor that I'm with was like, oh, this isn't a seizure. It's not a seizure. And later, I asked her about it, but she knew right away. She's like, watch. And then she pulls out an ammonia inhalant, because this was like kind of part of protocol back then. And you would put under the nose and the person started moving their face away. So yes, the person was faking, because if someone's having a seizure, they're going to be fully in it. They're going to be convulsing. They're going to be having involuntary movements, and sometimes they'll have incontinence, right? So this person moved their head away and then they started speaking immediately. So they were faking this seizure. And during that whole process, they were making a really big scene. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the first time I've ever seen that. And then afterwards, again, they were like yelling, hey, and doing stuff like that. So that was like my first exposure. There's another medical code. We went back to intake, another medical code, kind of the same exact thing. And then there's another medical code where someone was like, I think it was like a chest pain, right? So then they got sent out. It was a very busy shift. We were going back and forth from down and up. Just for a little bit more context, the nurse who's downstairs isn't responsible solely for the area upstairs. Just like there's a nurse, an RN downstairs with intake, there's an RN upstairs doing sick call. So our job downstairs that day was to just be a secondary responder to help out the nurse upstairs in case they needed help. So oftentimes by the time we got upstairs, where the medical code was, the nurse who's already upstairs working those units was already up on the scene, had it under control, and everything was good. We just kind of like, all right, you good? All right, we help them like kind of get some paperwork, do the send out real quick, and then we'd go back downstairs. So friends, the biggest thing that happened that day, because I'm kind of going back and forth, we're in intake, and then all of a sudden, like we see water at our feet, right? This is the big part of the story. This is still my first day. We see water at my feet, like coming through the door into the intake, and it starts to trickle in, and it gets very near our feet, and we're like, what? There's water here. And then we kind of go out the door and look, and it's coming out from underneath the safety cell door. And no one had noticed this yet because there's no noise. It's just kind of trickling out. The officers hadn't even noticed by this point. So we're like, officers, there's like water coming out underneath this door. You want to come check this out? So then they approached the door, and the guy had smeared feces on the window, the only little small window that it had like this, and the guy wasn't cooperating. So the officers, they were trying to work with this guy, but eventually they had to suit up, right? And by the time that, they spend all this half hour, 1 hour trying to speak to this guy, because the last thing that they want to do, right? The last thing officers want to do is suit up, put all this gear on, get the shield, and extract this guy from the cell. Because like that's a big thing, right? There's a lot of paperwork involved. They would avoid that at all costs, right? It also leads potentially for anyone to get injured, right, in the process. Patient, inmate, officers, it's not fun. So in this time while they're speaking with this inmate, we're still trying to see inmates coming in through intake, right? By the time we see a couple guys, by the time they're done kind of speaking to this guy in the safety cell and realizing he's not going to cooperate, like there's already about half an inch to like an inch of water in our room. We're like stepping in water in puddles, right? Like the whole thing was like a puddle that we're stepping on. And by that point, there's like an inch of water, maybe half an inch to an inch of water on the floor, which is crazy to me. And then because of this water, it like triggered some type of like safety alarm. And at the same time, while we're trying to do our work, they're speaking to this guy, there's a big old alarm just going beep, 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 and there's like no way to turn it off. So the whole time just beep, beep, beep. So like they're yelling to the guy through the door. We're trying to yell to get our assessments done in intake. And then eventually they decide to close down the county jail processing area, which I asked and they said had never happened. Like that was the first time. And take note, this was my very first day at this place. Crazy. But because the guy wasn't cooperating, right, we'll get back to that. We finished our line, we're just kind of observing the scene now. And because the guy didn't want to cooperate, the officers had to do their whole thing. They had to suit up, get the shield, get ready to extract this guy. As they're getting ready, right, to extract this guy, the officers aren't around as much anymore. There's like an officer or two still trying to, speak to this inmate, get him to cooperate, trying to make sure he's okay, because we can't even see him anymore. All of a sudden you hear, what was happening this whole time, which we later realized, was the sprinkler head, right, the fire sprinkler at the top, he was messing with it somehow. Because in there they're giving like a safety smock, he was probably like trying to loop it and break it, maybe hang himself from it or something. He was tinkering with it and it started leaking water, right? It started leaking water, and that's what was causing this water to trickle and flood the intake area. Somehow he had ripped it off and it was just gushing out water at this point. It was hitting the window. So all you see on the window is just a bunch of water bubbles just, and it, like you couldn't see anything into the cell, and you started seeing even more water come out from the cell that this guy was in. And the officers were hurrying even more to kind of gown up and get their gear on and get their shield. And they're like, all right, we really got to extract this guy now. And for us as a medical, people, as nurses, we were concerned for the guy's safety. We're like, oh, this guy can drown in there. So the officers immediately opened the door. They got ready real quick and immediately popped open the door, and the guy was fighting. He started fighting the whole time. They had to pull him out. It was like a whole event and scene on the puddle of water here. And eventually they were able to secure this patient inmate. But it was hard. It was a fight. And the whole time I'm watching him, like, do I get involved? Do I not get involved? Like, as a medical professional, I just got to make sure he's good. Like, he's not going to drown in this water. And they finally took control of the scene. But it took the whole team of officers. And they were exhausted. The inmate was exhausted by the time they were done. And they put him in a restraint that I've never seen even to this day, which was the full body restraint, just to give you a perspective of how combative this guy was. He was super combative. And friends, at that point, it was just chaos. The loudness of the alarm, the shuffle and scuffle on this water, me stepping in water, my socks are just drenched. You hear inmates saying, hey, there's water in here, get us out of here. And then the county jail was closed, right? The intake processing area literally closed for 6 hours. When they got this guy secured, they sent him out to the hospital. We were like, no, this guy has to go to the hospital. He needs some medical attention, because there's only so much we could do. So the nice thing about working in a county jail, one nice thing, is if there's nothing you can do, right, the guy requires more medical attention, you kind of just send him out, right, and the hospital will take care of them from that point on. We only do real simple things there, or emergency medical response, like EMT type stuff. Everything else gets sent out. But friends, I remember this moment, it was crazy, because I'm just like, this is my first day. Immediately after the guy is secured, a minute, 2-3 minutes later, there's another medical code that goes off. And the person I'm precepting with has kept their cool the whole time. I'm just kind of in it for the ride, because I'm just getting ping pong ball around, medical code, intake. This guy's being weird. Water in the cell, alarm going off. Officers having to restrain this inmate. I'm just oh. And I'm just going with it, right? When this medical code goes off, immediately after this, the nurse looks at me and was like, as we're running, right? Because when there's a medical code, you kind of run a little bit with the walkie-talkie. And then she's like, welcome to county jail. So that was the moment in the movie where I'm just welcome to, and they're like, welcome to county jail. And then later in the shift, friends, because the shift wasn't even over. There was still another 3 hours left. But by that point, it was all pretty chill, because literally the intake area had closed. It was closed. All we did was kind of round on everyone who was in the holding tanks. But even then, there weren't many people down there because it was flooding. So they had to kind of really process those guys and get them upstairs quick. So the last 2 hours were pretty chill, pretty quiet after that one medical code. And I'm just trying to process everything that happened. The alarm was still going off. The floors were still flooded. And the nurse at the end of the shift was like, hey, if you're back tomorrow, you're going to be just fine in corrections. And I came back the next day, and I came back with a sense of confidence that hey, I've been through the worst day ever. What more can happen, right? And some other things happened since I've been there, but since I've been there afterwards, but nothing in comparison to that. The nurse even said, my preceptor had said, hey, this was literally the worst day I've ever had here. And it was your first day. So yes, if you come back tomorrow, you're going to be just fine. And I'm honestly, friends, I'm glad I experienced that, because I was this is why I didn't want to work in a hospital, so I could experience this. And that made me realize I was actually in the right profession. It would scare a lot of people off, but it made me realize, yes, this is what I wanted. I wanted some energy. I wanted some action stuff. I wanted to be here in this chaotic environment. And I got it all of it bundled, packaged, wrapped in my very first day. I got people faking seizures. I got some chest pain and medical codes. I got intake stuff, people yelling, screaming. I saw an officer take down of an inmate, full restraint. I saw a guy shut down the county jail intake. Floor was flooded, alarms going off. It was everything, my first day. And I came back. But friends, that's the reason why I enjoyed working in corrections. Ever since then, I realized there's nothing worse truly in one day that can happen. Knock on wood. But friends, that's the story. That was my very first day and my very first job, and it was in corrections. If you're thinking about corrections, maybe this story will push you away from it. Maybe it will make you want to go into it. But either way, I'm here for you. I'm here just trying to share knowledge, trying to give some value back to a lot of men who are trying to become nurses. Just know that if you don't work in a hospital, I'm paving that path. I'm doing just fine. You don't have to work in a hospital if you don't want to, if that's not your calling. There's so many other areas you can work. You'll find your path for you. Friends, I enjoyed this one. Hopefully I was able to paint a decent, clear enough picture. If not, we'll refine tune it later in the future. But there'll be more to come. We're just getting started on this channel. I look around and I'm trying to find what other male nurses are making videos, and there weren't too many, at least some making them consistently. So that's what prompted me to continue to try to, pave this avenue here, create a space, cultivate a space for men to come on here and just hear one male nurse's experience. One male nurse who can kind of share a little bit of what he's been through. And that's what this channel is about. And hopefully it can guide people along the way a little bit. Because I wish I had that when I was first starting this path. So that's the main point of this channel now moving forward. We'll have story times like this every once in a while. Other videos will be more informative, but we're going to have fun on here and create a community hopefully over time. But either way, friends, I'm going to continue to be here. Good luck on your step, whichever step you're at, whether it's before nursing school, or in the workforce. You got this. As a man, you got this. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Until then.